Hey everyone, this is Kevin from thechesswebsite.com, and today I'm going to be covering my favorite topic in chess, and that is chess gambits. Ever since I was a kid, I loved playing chess gambits. Could be because Gambit was my favorite character on X-Men cartoons, or it could be because I loved giving up material in chess and then almost turning it into a puzzle. How can I give up material and then find an advantage for my setup? I just love that. So I made a video on my top 8 favorite chess gambits. Now it is subjective, so I want to give you the criteria that went into it. The first one is how often you're going to get to play this gambit. There's some obscure gambits that people like out there, but they just never come up. I like gambits that I can play anytime I want to because the positions are always coming up in my chess games. And the next one is how much fun the gambit is. I like to look at my opponent's face and just have them confused, trying to figure out why in the world I would play the moves that I'm making. So hopefully you guys enjoy this video. If you have other gambits that you really like, feel free to put those in the comment section below. But I think you'll find some on this video that you may not be familiar with. Also, for the first time in 10 years, we're going to try this out. If you wouldn't mind subscribing to the channel if you're not already and hitting the like button. Again, first time in 10 years, hundreds of videos, never asked for people to do that, but just curious to see how many people we can actually like this video and subscribe to the channel. So without further ado, hopefully you guys enjoy my top 8 chess gambits. Coming in at number 8, we have the Schliemann Gambit, which starts out with the Ruy Lopez with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop to b5. And usually in the Ruy Lopez, black's looking to play a6, looking to play knight to f6. But in the Schliemann Gambit, black plays f5, says, I'm going to completely disrupt everything white is looking to do. White can't continue in the same game plan. How do they really continue from here? It looks logical to take this material. That's completely fine. It's what black wants. Black can now push forward with e4. This knight can't come to g5 or h4. It's just going to fall to the queen. If it comes back to g1, that feels really weird. All of a sudden you have d1. The bishop can take here on f5. So all in all, white doesn't have nearly the setup that they were hoping for in the Ruy Lopez. All of a sudden, black is really looking to dominate the center of the board. So if you haven't played the Schliemann Gambit, it is a fun way to counter the Ruy Lopez. Coming in at number 7, we have the Tennison Gambit, which starts out with e4, d5. And I feel like anytime black plays this, they almost for sure know that white's going to take here on d5. But what if they don't? What if they play the Tennison Gambit, which is knight to f3, and says, yeah, I don't mind if you take this. I'm going to bring my knight up here to g5, attacking this. Now, they could just say, I'm going to completely ignore that. I don't know what you're up to. Great, you can just come back here and take with your knight. If they try to hold on to this, well, then you can start to get pretty aggressive with bishop to c4. You can see the knight on g5 is already attacking this square here on f7, which is extremely weak. It's only defended by the king here that's on e8 right now. So a lot of strong attacks. They can defend it in many different ways, but white has a strong attack depending on where they move. So that is the Tennison Gambit always catches your opponent off guard. Coming in at number 6, we have the Halloween Gambit, one of my favorites as a kid because it was the first gambit I played where I wasn't just giving up a pawn. I was actually giving up a knight, a minor piece. So that always intrigued me. Starts out with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and then usually gets into the 4 knights game with knight to c3, knight f6, and then the knight takes here on e5. So exchanging a knight for a pawn after the knight takes. Then white starts the offensive attack in the center of the board, pawn to d4. Usually the knight's going to come back to c6, and it can just continue to attack. Knight down here to e5, pawn pushes forward. Really just needs to come back here to g6. White can push forward again. Knight moves back here. So you can see black is up material, but white has a strong presence in the center of the board. If you haven't ever played the Halloween Gambit, I highly recommend. Always fun to give up a minor piece early on and then see if you can turn that into a win. Coming in at number 5, we have the Colorado Gambit, which starts out with e4, knight to c6, and then knight to f3. Or it could also start with the knight coming here to f3 first, and then the pawn here to e4. But either way, it's black's move, and the common response is not what we're going to play. That would be something like e5, bishop down here to b5. This gets into the right Lopez, which you could always play the Schliemann Gambit in this if you wanted to. But the Colorado Gambit says we're not even playing e5. We're just going to immediately attack here with f5. So very similar to the Schliemann Gambit, looking to attack the center of the board with the f pawn. Knowing that later on you could castle on the king side, you can have your rook here on the semi-open f-file at some point. Black has a lot of strong attacks, but they never expect you to play this f5. Now if they push forward, that's going to be completely fine. You can start to disrupt the center of the board. This opens up lines for your light square bishop to get involved into the game, to take away their center pawn here. If they don't take, maybe they get their bishop involved into the game, then you can just take their pawn. If they decide to go ahead and take, well, you can just start to push in the center of the board. They've lost their center pawn, so you have a lot of attacking lines. In the Colorado Gambit, definitely a good way to disrupt your opponent when they start out with e4, knight f3. Coming at number 4, we have the Jerome Gambit, one of the more aggressive lines that you'll see in this video series, but it starts out with e4, e5, knight f3, knight to c6. You can tell what type of games I play a lot of, but instead of the bishop coming to b5, the bishop's going to come to c4. And most common response is bishop down here to c5, and here's where things start to get tricky. The bishop takes on f7, sacrifices material and said, I'm going to give up my bishop for the pawn so that I can start to attack my opponent's king. Now, they don't have to take the bishop, but if they don't, that's just weird. Like, you should tell them to go ahead and take it because they're going to lose if they don't take it. But once they take it, that allows you to continue with the Jerome Gambit, and that says, I haven't given up enough material. I'm going to give up more. I'm going to go ahead and play knight to e5. This is check. They pretty much have to take with their knight. There's no real reason for them not to. But after they take with their knight, then queen to h5. And this is where the fun begins. So you can tell you've given up a lot of material already, a knight and a bishop, but you have a strong attack. Their king's out in the center, and you can start to have some fun. So if you haven't played the Jerome Gambit, I highly recommend it. Coming at number 3, we have the Steinitz Gambit, which starts out with e4, e5, but changing things up a little bit, and that is knight to c3. Most players just assume white's gonna, if they're gonna play a knight, come here to f3, but you don't always have to. You can play knight to c3, and many times black will just respond with the same thing. They'll go ahead and play knight to c6. Say, I'll just marry him, not exactly sure what you're doing, and then you can play f4, and this is where the fun begins in the Steinitz Gambit. After they take here, white's really just looking to dominate the center of the board. That's the main theme of this opening. But after d4, black can start to attack and play queen down here to h4, and the king has to come to e2. You're not going to play pawn here because then after the pawn takes, you're just giving up more material, and the pawn can't recapture because the rook is going to fall. The king has to come here to e2, and this looks really awkward because the king is blocking this light square bishop and it can no longer castle to either side of the board, but it actually works out extremely well for white. The knight's going to come here to f3 pretty soon, chase the queen around, while black's busy moving his queen, not doing anything productive. White's over here developing the center of the board, getting all his minor pieces developed into the game, chasing black around. It's a very, very good gambit, and white has a lot of attacking lines that may not look like it when you just look at this board setup right here. Coming in at number 2, we have the Cochrane Gambit, and that starts out with e4, e5. Don't judge me, I play a lot of e4 games, and there's a lot of gambits that come out of this. Knight to f3, and then knight to f6. So sometimes black will try the Petrov defense, which is this right here, thinking that they can catch white off guard. And it normally continues with knight to e5, and then the pawn comes to d6, and the knight comes back to f3, and then the knight takes here, and then we continue on the board. But what if white says, not today? I'm not going to retreat. I'm going to continue my attack, and that's exactly what the Cochrane Gambit does, and the knight takes here on f7. Now after the king takes, if they don't take, that's just weird. You're going to take this rook, you're going to take the queen, bad things are going to happen. So after they take here, then white's going to play d4. Because this opens up all the lines. The queen is online, the light square bishop's online, now the dark square bishop's online. It's also giving up another pawn of material. If they want to take that, that's fine. Queen can come over here to h5. This square is no longer protected, attacking the king. The queen can swing over here depending on where the king goes to, can get both the bishops involved. Things are extremely bad for black. Definitely a fun way. Anytime someone tries the Petrov, this is always my go-to because it catches them off guard. They just always expect the knight to come back here to f3. But then just to see them, after I played knight to f7 and realize that they're going to get their king chased around the board for the rest of the game. Coming in at number 1, we have the Muzio Gambit. And yes, it derives from the King's Gambit, but I felt like it was almost cheating to have number 1 being the King's Gambit because I always do videos on the King's Gambit. Most of you know that that is my favorite opening, but this is a specific variation in the King's Gambit that is my favorite. Anytime I get the opportunity to play it, I absolutely will. The King's Gambit, for those not familiar, e4, e5, f4, and then after the pawn recaptures, knight to f3. Now, the Muzio Gambit really needs them to come down with g5, which many times they will. They'll start to attack on the king side of the board. This protects this pawn and start to add pressure on this g4 square. Sometimes in the King's Gambit, you'll play h4, so that then when they come down here to g4, you have an outpost. You can start to attack, get your light square bishop over here to c4, and attack the f7 square. But that's not what the Muzio Gambit's looking to do. It says, I don't even care about that. I'm just going to start developing my material. And so if they push forward, this is where it gets even more fun because you're just going to castle on the king side. You don't even care about the knight. After they take with their pawn, you're going to recapture with your queen. So you can see you have your most powerful piece involved into the game. You have your bishop here eyeing down on their weakest square. You've already castled. You have a rook open on the semi-open file. They can't castle on the king side and have king safety. Their g pawn is gone. They have no pieces developed. You can easily push forward here with a d4 and get your dark square bishop involved into the game. So anytime I play the King's Gambit, although I don't know what my opponent's going to do, the Muzio Gambit is my number 1 go-to if I have the opportunity to play it. So that is my list of top 8 chess gambits. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Again, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the video. And if you liked this list and want to see more, feel free to give me a thumbs up. Also, if you have a gambit that I did not cover, that you want to let people know about, that you enjoy playing, feel free to leave that in the comments. If you have other chess video ideas, you can always contact me at email, thechesswebsite@gmail.com. That is the best way to reach out to me. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.